Hey, I'm Ilya Komakin, and this is Human-Powered Engineering. Today, in Module 4 of our course, we talk about bringing Scrum to scale. And to begin with, growth is a leadership challenge. Growth doesn't start with headcount, it starts with business needs. When business scales, the team must scale. And when the team scales, you must grow too, or you will be the bottleneck. Scaling is not about adding people, it's about adding capability. In this module, we will explore how scaling starts from business needs, how dependency management becomes the heart of scaling, why leadership maturity matters more than frameworks, and how to stay human while growing. Because, again, growth without leadership is just organizational sprawl. So, let's get to it. So, why will scale? Because business demands drive team expansion, never the other way around. How to tell that scaling is real? Customer base is growing, product complexity is rising, and time to market pressure increases. Now, scaling decisions are business decisions. You have new revenue streams, new customer segments, new technical capabilities. Okay, if you're not growing to serve a real need, then you're just building overhead. And so, what is scaling? It is about taking more responsibilities, delivering more results. Yes, hiring more people, but most of all, it's about managing dependencies. In Scrum, even at scale, you don't need to manage tasks. Teams do that better than you ever will. But as the number of team grows, something else enters the game: dependencies. And they become the real enemy, not chaos. Here's a critical distinction. Tasks are get tracked, and eventually they are get done. Tasks are visible. Dependencies often get missed until they explode. They're very often silent. They will sit between teams, between roles, between intentions, and become visible only when things start breaking. And no, they won't show up in Jira, at least by themselves. They will show up when it's already a problem. What kind of dependencies? Technology, starting with feasibility, cannot even be built at the first place. And data flow. What depends on your data upstream and downstream? Functional links, because services and components will have to be integrated. Infrastructure, environments, and configurations will outright destroy everything if they are not aligned. Then we have customers with their own set of dependencies, which are like roadmap alignment, deployment expectations, even non-functional needs like data throughput, latency, or compliance. Live example. In most large companies, development and DevSecOps are separate. Once our delivery team finished the build, and rollout didn't happen for the next couple of months because DevOps were not ready, they were waiting for infrastructure. And then rollout came, and environment wasn't ready, and team had to move on. As a result, deployment hell, because no actual infrastructure contract. The things desynchronized, and product which should be deployed is behind code base by that time because the team keeps delivering. And no proper communication between operations and development because they're different teams. So it took, first of all, taking a closer look and fixing some change management practices, defining infrastructure contracts more clearly, removing assumptions out of it. Finally, unblocking communications between teams that actually they reported to different directors. And only after that we were able to ship. Result? Smaller scale, your work flows through conversations. At large scale, these conversations become something like invisible threads. They are still in place, but you can't see them. So if you don't map them, you will trip hard. Core idea of this example that you don't have to scale work, you have to scale coordination. And no, dependencies are not going to manage themselves. If you skip managing them, they will eventually come for you. Let's take a deeper look into how scaling changes your approach to delivery. From shared memory, you move to explicit agreements. Because when you grow from a two-pizza team to a larger organization, tribal knowledge doesn't work anymore. You no longer share context by default. You cannot even sit all together in the same room. So you need to document shared agreements, and not just the rules, but also the reasoning behind them. Otherwise, you will have to spend endless hours in repeated conversations about what's obvious and why this way was chosen and not another. From spontaneous fixes, you move to structured handshakes. Have you ever seen how quick fix can break half the system? Of course you have. What used to be a 1 hour rollback now turns into a week of integration fixes and regression testing. At scale, what looks like a simple band-aid often requires very expensive regression. And that's why we're going to need two things. First of all, dependency tracking and traceability. To have an understanding which parts of code impact which requirements and how these changes can be tested. Surprise! Release planning, not for our customers, but this time for ourselves, to ensure that we run regression efficiently by grouping and sequencing changes for maximum synergy. Because without this, your fixes just will multiply the chaos. Now we move from one owner to multiple stakeholders. And this is painful too. When you're by yourself, you align with yourself, and that's pretty easy. When you have 5 stakeholders, then every clash tends to become political. Like it or not, you'll have to need a formal decision-making process. And this process must be business-driven and visible all the way down to delivery teams. When people start saying it used to be easier, they don't mean emotionally. They mean that system has outgrown its original design. What kind of science? Bottleneck become to happen more often, wait times multiply, and since you don't have a single owner to track them, they become invisible. Borderline roles and responsibilities start falling through the cracks. It is important to remember that managing scaling is a leadership skill and not a process checkbox. Let's go to key scaling principles. Delegation, which means start with yourself. If you don't do it, you will drown in routine sooner than you think. Then prepare for team growth in advance. Create rotation plans. You will need them when promoting or replacing people. Don't wait until it's too late. Location strategy, because without one, either hiring will stagnate or coordination will turn into hell if you use too many locations for a few teams. And finally, flat structures versus deep structures. How to choose between bureaucracy and overload. You can't avoid the trade-off, and there is not really good choice. But what you can do, you can make your choice conscious. Now, let's discuss hierarchies. Do you like flat teams or deep teams? And why? First glance, deep hierarchies look wasteful. And on paper, if you flatten them, we will become more efficient. Cut a layer, overhead drops, everyone's closer to the action. Cleaner, leaner, fragile, right? No. In practice, when you flatten too far, the mass will start to break down. Look at the pictures and notice how management overhead stabilizes between 500 and 2000 employees. But what if we want to optimize? What if we are to eliminate one of the levels at mid-scale? Let's see what's happening. Let's remove 7 second level managers in an option 3-star. So here, for the sake of clarity, every team has 7 workers and 1 manager, and every 7 managers have a manager of their own. So the structure scales exponentially. Now, we remove this 7 manager from second level. We're saving about 2% of work time on overhead. Not huge, but measurable. But then what? Now your third level manager finds themselves with 40 to 50 direct reports. Sounds smart until you think about it. Manager with 40 plus directs, he cannot lead anymore. They're running from fire to fire. They don't have time to mentor, to coach. They don't have real connections. So in the best case, they running with this hose and firefighting. Nice. Worst case, they spread too thin. They will miss key signals. People will feel ignored, and delivery rots from the inside. And nature hates vacuum. So what happens? Informal delegates will emerge. And since they have no formal authority, they lead in the shadows, which will breed confusion and erode trust. Your line manager and senior guys will start covering gaps, will start try to integrate, mentor, nudge, steer. But the thing is, they weren't hired for that. They don't always have a skill, but the work needs doing. So, my congratulations. You didn't eliminate management, you just pushed it down one level. And this hidden overhead is worse than formal layers because it is inconsistent by design. It is unrecognized by design. Is it often unrewarded? Like almost every time it will not be rewarded. And it creates invisible fractures in the team. And yes, too much hierarchy is bad. But if you cut smart structure, it isn't about agility, it's cost cutting. And mindless cost cutting will break things faster than you think. Remember, good hierarchy supports delivery. Broken hierarchy will quietly kill it. Now, to another extreme, massive scaling frameworks. And scaling frameworks, like SAFe, were created for a reason. In massive programs like building 787 Dreamliner, coordination wasn't a luxury, it was a necessity for survival. Let's pause for a second. We all roll our eyes at heavyweight frameworks. And yes, when the pressure mounts, when coordination falters, when investors need predictability, many organizations will rely on these frameworks. Not because they're bad, because they offer something that looks like control. And when uncertain, people will choose control over agility because of their fear of losing. Even if the price will be speed, engagement, or innovation, they will choose this control, and control creates the illusion of progress, but slows actual delivery. When framework help, remember 787? When you have hundreds of teams, regulatory environments, like FA certification, highly distributed environment, when frameworks hurt, when you're too complex for your own good, when you're building processes for the sake of processes, you're losing agility. So here's the thing. You don't need a spacesuit to walk across the town. You don't need a jetliner cockpit to ride a bike. Your tools must match the mission. A simple health check. If it takes you 6 rolls and 5 meetings to agree on one step, then probably you're scaling bureaucracy and not value. Choose your structure to match your scale. Grow this structure based on your real needs, not appearances. Frameworks are tools, and like any tool, they work good when they apply to the right problem and the right time and not just in case. Yes, you're gonna respect the tool, but please, respect your reality even more. How to scale distributed teams? Scaling is not just about adding people. It's also about spreading them across cities, across time zones, and pretty often even cultures. And distributed teams, they aren't an exotic case anymore. Not after COVID, not after the remote work is with us. They are the default reality for growing companies because they help to hire globally, to access the talent, and to manage the costs. They are needed for around the clock support and development cycles. They are necessary to build products for customers in multiple regions. And on paper, this sounds simple. We have Slack, we have Teams, we all know how to jump on a Zoom call. But at scale, when we distribute teams across the world, it creates its own class of dependencies, like time zone gaps. Daily rhythm is fragmented and urgent decisions are painful. Then context drift, because team will gradually lose sight of each other's context if you're not focusing on communications. And then, yes, asynchronous silos, because issues will tend to escalate slower, if ever, and they will surface too late if they are hidden in this regional team far away from you. And here is the harsh truth. Distributed does not equals independent. Distributed teams, they still depend on each other, they're doing basically the same thing. And that means that scaling them isn't just about tooling. It's about consciously designing how they will work together and how they will communicate. So here's how that looks in practice. First story, Scrum that wasn't a Scrum. It was a distributed support team, and we used Scrum ceremonies mostly for increased visibility. So we introduced asynchronous daily stand-ups. We didn't have any formal sprint planning. Tasks were ticket-based, response-driven, and yes, we did introduce retrospectives because we needed that adaptability. So, just a few lightweight rituals helped the team to reduce internal chaos and to avoid duplicate work across the time zones. The second is about dual location Scrum. So imagine one team split between two sites, one Scrum Masters, two daily stand-ups, by two, time zone difference. So it was more overhead for Scrum Masters and dev leads because I required dev leads from both sides to attend all the meetings. But it gives us 50+% productivity increase with the same budget. The key was to align definition of done between the teams and making sure they were still working on one shared backlog. Even harder, Scrum with 15 hours time difference. So product owner and customer were located in Seattle, and the team was in Siberia. So we had very little overlap, just Seattle mornings, but it still worked. We had to adapt the team. Our stand-ups were short and focused, and for rituals which are performed once a sprint, like grooming, planning, retro, review, we tightly packed them in half a day window. So yes, that wasn't easy, but it just happened once a sprint. Customer was open, Teams was flexible, and we managed to build trust fast by delivering real value. Bonus note here. Usually I try to start such setups with a business trip to establish rapport. This time wasn't needed. And getting back to the key idea, why scaling fails? Most often, it will fail because of the leadership gap. Because teams don't fail scaling for lack of process. They fail when leadership doesn't scale with the teams. And it is about evolving how you teams are busier, decisions will slow down, outcomes will be stuck, and autonomy will erode because priorities clash and no one feels empowered enough to solve them. And yes, used to feel easier. And here's the part that's hardest to see when you're inside it. If leadership doesn't grow with the system will collapse under its own weight. At first, you don't notice. Then suddenly, you're solving the same problems again and again, but slower and slower, and trust will fade, and energy will drain, and delivery will fall. So, growing leadership means manage not tasks, but tensions. It is navigating conflicting priorities without freezing the team. It is about delegating and helping others step up, not just holding ground by yourself. Let's wrap it up with a personal story. One time, I led a team which had to grow up from 60 to 120 engineers in just 1 year. And frankly, it felt like running two completely different organizations. Scaling at that speed, it means you are adding roughly one new team every month, and it wasn't just about hiring. It means creating this space within your team to grow, to reshape coordination and project intake and QA and everything in between. And I have started with 5 managers, and I should have 10. And that wasn't the full picture. I still had to communicate with aspiring team leads, architects, test managers, business analysts. At one point, I realized I had over 20 people reporting directly to me. And hiring senior talent fast enough, that's a problem of its own. So I had to promote many new managers internally, and I needed heavy coaching for them to succeed. And yes, I was keeping holding on to project intake myself, as it was the most complicated thing of all. And that decision nearly cost me. I almost slipped on delivery on one of the projects because I was stretched too thin, and I didn't notice red flags in time, and I was not able to drive needed changes. And then I realized that I need to restructure, desperately. So I introduced coordination PM roles, selecting 3 trusted managers who took over sub-programs. They were mentoring their own leads, and they were shielding me very efficiently from daily issues. So I was able to focus entirely on growing those 3 guys. I have created a dedicated intake team. I retained formal authority, but bulk of the work I was able to delegate, and it created some space in my head, which I was able to use. So we reworked promotion and backfill strategy across the organization. It had to match personalities, balance workloads, and basically proactively manage tension before it become critical. With that in place, my inner circle naturally took ownership, and with that firefighting reduced, I was able finally to return to proactive leadership, to drive direction and not just be in reactive mode trying to fight with chaos. Final thoughts. Scaling is hard, but it's also an opportunity. Great scaling feels like you grow in an orchestra, not a factory assembly line. Your job is not about adding processes. Your job is to build a system where people, trust, and delivery come to scale together. If you are losing sight of the why in this process, then bureaucracy will be inevitable. In the next model, we'll talk about the burnout. Not abstractly, but in terms of how scaling, bureaucracy, overload, mixed roles, when poorly done, it will become personal. It will tire out people. It will fade trust and result into quiet quitting. We will face that and learn to prevent it. Stay with us and see you in the next one.